To kick off with our first session for today, Leadership Through Times of Crisis, I'm delighted to introduce your moderator, Liam Black, and Chairman of Big White Wall, who'll be joined by Florian Kemmerich, Managing Partner of Bamboo Capital Partners, Kevin Ayres, an Exec Coach in Conscious Leadership and the former MD Europe of LinkedIn, Sepati Mokhua, the CEO of Southern African Women in Leadership, and Susan Actimel, the Exec Director of the Homes for Good Social Business Group. Over to you, Liam.
Thank you very much, Tom. It's lovely to be here. It's a great honor to run this session and to welcome everyone, wherever you are in the world. I'm told that you are a very diverse and very scattered group of people, but what unites you is that you are entrepreneurs, many of you trying to build your businesses, remain resilient, and run successful enterprises. There's so much talk that goes on in the world about leadership, and so much of it is very highfalutin. It's like big theories and lots of hard to understand words. So I guarantee you that today we're not going to get lots of filler. It's going to be all thriller. And we have briefed our 4 excellent speakers to come up with some 3 top tips, pieces of advice based on their insights and experience as leaders. So there'll be no sort of hiding behind grand quotes or looking for our inner unicorn. It's going to be very, very specific. And this session will have worked really, really well is if you've got you've got lots of notes and you've got some stuff that you can start doing today or tomorrow or next week in your business. So that's what we hope. So the way it's going to run is that we have 4 speakers, and the fairest way I could work out is how the order we go in is we're going to do it in descending order of their mileage from London, where I'm speaking to you from, or very near London. So we're going to start off with Sepati, who's in Johannesburg. Will be followed by Kevin, who's in San Francisco, Florian, who's in Brussels, and Susan, who's in Glasgow. So we have some of the best places in the world covered. And so without further ado, we're going to go to Johannesburg, and we're going to hear from Sepati and her tips about how to cope in a time of crisis.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, Liam, for the introduction. And I'm going to get right into it because I only have 5 minutes, and I know that you keep your promises. So if you say you're going to mute me, you are going to mute me. So as an impact entrepreneur myself, I am very delighted to be here sharing with you some of the practical tips that have kept us afloat during these challenging times, right? I honestly believe that effective leadership has to be at the core of your foundation as a social entrepreneur, not only when a crisis strikes. The first thing that I want to share with you is what I did with my team was to encourage them to do away with the box mentality and accept that the time for thinking outside the box was no longer a luxury we could afford. In as much as COVID has ravaged many industries and businesses the world over, for impact entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs, it presented an opportunity to lead from the front. We are solution driven by nature. So what I personally experienced with my team and colleagues was a surge in our need to do more and look for opportunities to solve the problems that are currently being exacerbated by the pandemic itself and will continue to affect us post COVID-19. So as you pivot, be comfortable with completely removing the box. That's my first tip. Allow your team to explore solutions that will not only help you and your local community, but the world at large. And secondly, think global. The world was already becoming smaller and smaller as a result of the growing digital disruption and connectivity before this pandemic, right? So for us, the confinements and lockdowns presented an opportunity to be deliberate in our pursuit to connect with key role players, both in the continent and globally. Subsequently, we have launched a project where we source the best startups in Africa match the digital expertise, capacity, and resources of these impact African innovators, solving for emerging issues with local, continental, and global investors, incubators, and accelerators, etc. So the purpose of our hub, if I can just quickly share, is to bring together like-minded people who would like to be at the forefront of solution-driven innovations that will leapfrog Africa as a continent, and thus positioning it for global competitive advantage post-COVID-19. Now, when I say think global, I'm not just saying it, I'm speaking from experience. There is a greater appetite for global collaborations. This project that I've just mentioned, for example, has since attracted from support from UAE, Europe, North Africa, etc. These are areas I wouldn't typically consider under normal circumstances in terms of collaboration if it wasn't for COVID-19. Lastly, a tip I want to share with you is communication. Communication goes a very long way. For those of you currently struggling to make ends meet, effective communication, openness, and honesty goes a long way in reassuring your team, your stakeholders, your suppliers, your creditors, etc. Every single person has been adversely affected by this pandemic. So there's no need to act a hero and pretend to have everything under control when you are in fact drowning. Communicate and don't be afraid to knock on doors and seek help. You never know where your help might come from. And as our president here in South Africa, Ndate Cyril Ramaphosa, said, who is also the chair of the AU. AU is African Union. I know that you guys are more familiar with EU. So he said that the pandemic requires an economic response that is equal to the scale of the disruption it is causing. And I think myself and my team, that's one of the things that we really honestly pride ourselves in, and is to be at the forefront of those solution-driven innovations that will sort of respond to the pandemic at the rate that it is disrupting us. And lastly, I strongly believe that as impact entrepreneurs, this is our time to really put our best foot forward and come up with solutions that will give the world somewhat a soft landing pad on the other side of the pandemic. That's my 2 cents. I hope I kept to my 5 minutes. Back to you, Liam.
You have set the bar very high, straight off the blocks. In fact, we've got a minute to go, so I have a question for you. Could you just tell us, you've got a minute, say, how do you communicate? Are you using social media? Are you emailing people every day? Are you on the phone all day? How do you decide who you will communicate with and how?
Oh my goodness, I have to share with you, that has actually been one of the most burdensome exercises of my life during this past 3 months, but at the same time very exciting because I get to connect with some really powerful and influential people. So LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm extremely active on LinkedIn, more than any other social media platform, and that's where I have met some of the greatest connections, even influential leaders and partners and collaborators. And some of these people, are not even, they are quite keen and hungry to mentor Africans, young Africans such as myself, who are really keen on solving, world problems. So LinkedIn is the place to be. I know that we all like Instagram, it's nice and whatever, and Twitter and stuff, but LinkedIn has worked for me. And then obviously, depending on on the seriousness of the conversation, then I'm happy to take you to email or WhatsApp or whatever other platform. Yeah, but LinkedIn works for me.
Yeah, I have discussed. Yeah, I came off Facebook last year because I can't stand Mark Zuckerberg.
I've been off. I've been off Facebook for 5 years now.
Yeah, but I was a late exiter. But I found LinkedIn incredibly useful and a really good way of having serious conversations with people. So thank you for the moment. And you've done a beautiful segue into our next speaker, Kevin, who used to run LinkedIn in Europe. So that was absolutely highly professional of you, Sapati, to help me do that. So let's move to our second speaker, who's sitting in San Francisco, Kevin.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Kevin. I did run LinkedIn in Europe And it was during the financial crisis. So 08, 09, that financial crisis. I was also running Alta Vista way back when in 9/11, and actually sitting right next to Centrepoint in London. And so what I'm going to talk about is, leading through crisis is, one of the things is to realize that we're all human and we're all going through having our own individual reactions to this. And it's also a collective human experience that we're going through. So my first tip in this is regulation. And what I mean by regulation is you have to put your own mask on first. Realize this is a traumatic event that's happened and you're going to be triggered. So you're not going to be thinking straight. Your body is going to be doing what it does naturally, which is fight, flight, or freeze. Lots of cortisol, lots of adrenaline, and it may feel like a powerful state, but you're really not listening so well because you have a very limited view. And if you're in this fight mode, everything looks like an argument. Everybody looks like an enemy. And so you can really stifle your own creativity and the creativity of those around you. And so part of how to regulate yourself is awareness that you're in this state and simply breathe. It's one of the best ways in order to regulate yourself. And you move from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system, and you have the ability to actually respond versus react. All right, so that's you as a leader taking care of your own needs. The second thing is trust and safety. So you need to lower the temperature for your whole team by explaining the problem honestly in a straightforward way, right? You're not going to use a lot of jargon. You want to be really clear and consistent. Say, here's the situation. We know what's happening, or at least to the best of our ability, we have it. We know that we can handle this. And so by allowing the team to acknowledge, or that you can acknowledge the issue, then you're allowing them to feel safe, right? They also know that they can trust you because you're not trying to cover anything up. You're not going around ringing the fire bell all the time to try to get them motivated to, cross this next hurdle. And so you're able to help them regulate themselves. You're also showing that you have empathy and compassion, right? It's like, I'm here for you, and we're also here for each other. And this whole motivation is like, we can actually get through this together because we know what's happening here. You're also letting them know that it's like, I'm actually getting help from other leaders as well. And in a way, you're giving them permission for them to start asking for help, for colleagues within the company or people outside. So, and then the last thing I would say, or the third thing that I would say, is that you want to ground them in vision and values. Remember, it's like, it's an escalated point, in the middle of a crisis. I really remember when we were literally across the street from Centrepoint, one of the high buildings, the tallest buildings during the middle of 9/11, and people were really panicking. And, and so, getting some trust and safety in there, helping them regulate. But when we took them back to, it's like, what are the values that we have? Then it allows people to, instead of just being focused on something very narrow, to look up, right? And then, by having them focused on the values and the vision, then you're able to bring them back to, it's like, I know what this is. I know we've been, not just talking about these, but living these. And I can start to search for what are the solutions, and not just help me out of this one particular problem, but I'm focused on that longer term. Because many times in a crisis, everybody gets very narrow viewed, and it's like, I have to solve this thing, or they go around, looking for immediate solutions, when you do need to take stock of what's, put out the fire right in front of you. But it's also about, I need to make sure I'm leading for the longer term here. So those are my three, big components. Allow people to be able to regulate, get trust and safety, and then by grounding back and then having this longer term vision, then you're able to solve the problems. And remembering that as a leader's role, you don't have to solve every problem. What you have to do is enable your team to be able to do what they do best. And your role is really to ask the great questions, right? The quality of your questions is going to lead to better and more longer term strategic answers. So.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a fantastic phrase that you used there, and how apt. Put your own mask on first. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs, particularly who have been in the early stages, whose business has been really badly affected by what's going on. I chair a company, and we're having to put it into administration shortly. And I think I would add to your thing about looking after yourself, that it's okay to grieve for what you've lost. And and I think being honest about, actually, I have given a few years of my life to this, and it's over, and I need to look ahead. So I think, I see too many impact-led entrepreneurs at the moment sort of punishing themselves, and when they just need to step back, take a breath, put their own mask on, take some oxygen, and just say, hey, it's time for me to move on. Thank you very much, Kevin. That's great. So we're going to jump on our meaningful business metaphorical plane, and we're going to fly back to Europe, and we're going to hear from Florian. Welcome, Florian.
Thank you, Liam. And exciting times, interesting times. So in my career, I have done several turnarounds. Turnaround meaning you have to be working on a difficult situation, how to readdress the business at its time. I've done that for corporates. I've done that for SMEs. I've done that for startups and in other businesses. So and it reminds me always, as we are now going through a historic crisis, which hits everybody in the world, not just some parts of the world, where others were advantaged. Here, it's really all over. And it reminds me also that as an entrepreneur, of course, you go through painful times, sleepless nights, and you have to stand in front of your crowd and drive them in front of the customers, talking to investors and pitching in order to support your money and get what you need. And I have kind of three themes when doing that. First one is strengthen your stamina. This is a little bit like in sports, when it pains, when it hurts, you can still a little bit go further. And there are very little things I do myself when I had passed these sleepless nights and the problem saying and the big problem in front of me. First is hold the vision and trust the process. So that you go step by step, you go day by day, you stand up in the morning. I go to the shower, I ask myself, set me in the mood, even though things are so difficult and I'm, so scared, that I ask myself what I'm grateful for today, 3 things. I think them through and the day starts better off, and then to look at. That also means that you celebrate quick wins. You have something which you have added, or a new contact, or a new option, new possibility, and that helps you to further go on. And it's very important that, and this to strengthen your stamina, is not to listen to the bozos. The ones, the naysayers, how difficult it is, how risky is what you're doing, and how dangerous the situation is, doesn't help you. Focus on the glass half full, because it's not that bad. I have pretty good base. And this is where you go day by day, and you see things not in the moment, because when you are running through the forest and you're hitting some trees and you have to circle around them, you're not seeing the forest entirely. But over time, you see actually, oh, I've actually made some good leeway. The second is embrace change. Really adapt yourself constantly. One of the themes I use very often, no is a yes with conditions. I've learned that from a previous boss of mine. So if something is a no, you have to ask why. What are the conditions around? Let's talk about the conditions. You might come to a middle ground. You might come to a lead, and maybe somebody saying no doesn't mean no, and then you find solutions. And this helps you to create and find opportunities to go by embracing change and adapting you constantly. The third topic is, and again, this is of course in impact investing even more important, you want to right a wrong. Yeah, I've heard that sentence many years ago from Guy Kawasaki, and I embraced it, and I use that so that that I'm working on my perceived value or the perceived value of the company, not the real value. Yeah, so that you're building a dream and you're there being bold, because that's contagious, even in crisis, especially in the crisis. So but you focus on stakeholder value, not shareholder value. And that includes your community, includes your employees, includes your providers, includes your also shareholders, but it's not the shareholder saying, oh, I have this investor on my neck right now, performance is not there, and I don't know what's going, things will be tough. No, you try to turn it around, because it's a psychological decision, a perceived value. So you stimulate the intrinsic motivation by everybody around you, and it's contagious. And this is very much, and again, we've said that before very nicely, that when you communicate with many people, if you help others without asking anything for it, things will turn out and come back to you. So that's the third, because in every crisis provides the biggest and greatest opportunities for everyone to leap afterwards.
That's great, thank you. And as an investor, are you still out there looking for investments, or are you looking after your existing portfolio? How is it affecting how you view what you'll invest in and what you won't invest in?
So fundraising as an investor has become more challenging in crisis, always. Lived that several times in my time. And you cannot get loose, and I'm applying, as I told you, the same things when I raise funds, and we raise funds for a company. The same is also when you invest. You cannot just stand there and not holding back and saying, oh, let's see how the tsunami turns out. You have to look at the portfolio companies and how to engage with them and how to solve them and help them through the difficult phase. And that doesn't necessarily tie only to money. There are many ways to do that. And again, as impact investor anyway, the conversation having with the company is not just about the financial return.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. 5 minutes on the nose, absolutely brilliant. Okay, and our fourth speaker, we've jumped on our metaphorical plane and we're now landing in the beautiful country of Scotland, where it's unseasonably warm at the moment, and there waiting for us is Susan Actimel. Susan, over to you.
Hi everyone. I've thought about this as a sort of a 3-step of a process rather than 3 tips, I suppose. First of all, I've thought about who it is that I lead, who I serve, who are the people that are looking to me in the context of a crisis. And that ranges from my family, my immediate family, through to my team that work with me, through to the 700 or so people that live in my homes, many of whom are very vulnerable, the property owners who are looking for us to protect their investment, our board members, and also our investors and funders. So when you're a leader of a social business or a leader of any business, you have a number of people that you need to serve in a crisis. And the first thing that I did was looked at myself. I looked at my own safety and survival and my family's safety and survival. And I said, how long can we last? We don't know what's happening here. What does this mean to us? Can we survive this? And as soon as I felt safe, and as soon as I knew that my family was safe and I'd worked that out, I was then able to focus on my business and my team. So I suppose point 1 is focus on your own safety and survival. And then what I did was I worked very quickly with my team and did as much scenario planning as we possibly could, and looked at all the different risks and went to the worst case scenario. We looked at what we thought our worst case was and worked out a plan of how we thought we would tackle that and what it meant for us. And I suppose it's a wee bit like staring danger in the face and seeing what it looks like. And I think we then moved, once we realised that we sort of thought we knew what we were doing and that we thought we were going to get through things. My job was then to communicate that to everyone. And I think, as Kevin said, enabling people to feel safe. So the next stage that I went into was, we've got a plan. And I communicated that systematically to everyone, to our team. The most important thing was that they felt safe so that they could then go on and help our tenants feel safe. I communicated it to our investors and our board, because I also knew that they would be managing lots of other risky situations. So I wanted them to know very quickly that we were fine, and that we would let them know if there were any problems, and that gave them some space. And then when you're in that you've got your plan, I then moved into the delivery of that plan. And that was where I would say the leadership became really challenging, because you're directing your team, you're behaving a little bit like a shepherd, you're supporting and nudging. Sometimes you're having to grab people and pull them back. My style changed from being a very collaborative, informal leader to being very directive, because there was no time for consultation and no time for discussion around things. I also had to be prepared to rewrite the plan. And it was I found that a very hard time. And the way that I got through that particular period was resetting every day. And no matter how difficult the day had been before, I got up and started again the next day. And we then moved into the sort of third phase, which I suppose we're in right now, which is eyes on the horizon, looking forward, looking at what's happening next in the short and medium term, but also what are the opportunities. And there's lots of opportunities for growth and for change and for improvement in what we already do. And so that's probably quite an exciting phase to be in. I'm constantly looking at the environmental, the scanning of the politics and the economy, and translating that into what does that mean for Homes for Good, and what does it mean for my team. But at the same time, making sure that we keep safe and being fully prepared to go back a step, because I think we're all recognising that there may be a point where we do have to go back a step and go back into go back to safety and protect our safety. And I suppose the three tips that I've got through those three stages, or throughout the whole situation, is first of all, as a leader, to have self-belief. You've ended up in this position for a reason, and you're capable. At the same time, be very open to learning and learning and listening to everybody around you, and be proactive about learning. And one of the huge benefits of what's happened to us all is that we are able to connect globally and learn from people across the world in the way that we are today. And I think the third thing I would say is that throughout all of that is to be generous and take care of yourself and take care of everyone around you and be kind.
Thanks, Susan. That was great. Again, time is against us. There's some questions here about looking after one's mental health. And I'm going to leave those questions, because there's a session coming up after this, which is explicitly talking about how entrepreneurs and leaders can look after their mental health. But there's a good question here from Asma Offman, who's saying that we're all running businesses that already exist. If you're trying to get a startup going in a crisis like this, what might be your piece of advice? And I'll ask the four of you for one short piece of advice to a startup entrepreneur whose plans might have been derailed as a result of this COVID. So Susan, you happy to start with that? Just give us a one piece of really chunky advice that you would give someone whose startup is in crisis now.
I think it's the same as if you are in an existing business situation, that you have to say, what does this now mean? The situation has changed, and what actually does that mean in practice? And what are the changes that we're going to have to make? I think it's just staring the situation in the face and accepting that the world has changed, and finding a way to change accordingly to keep going.
Thank you. Florian?
Yes, I would say, and we've seen that also on our end, you have to focus on what is in people's minds. So it's not just a normal pitch deck you would have. Here's a startup, I have my plan ABC, and there's the market, and here's the product. It doesn't normally. You have to put it in the current context. So for right now, if you do impact investing, probably and you focus on resolving the crisis, is hotter lead than just doing a business X, Y, or Z. So embrace the context and use levers you have to solve and provide solutions to it.
Thank you. Kevin?
I agree a lot with what Florian is saying. It's look for those opportunities. What's the core value you're providing? At LinkedIn, financial crisis, we were a lot about networking and jobs, right? People were losing their jobs all over the place. And we looked at what's our value to an individual member? What's strengthen the network, be able to solve problems and find opportunities. So we messaged what were the core values around what was happening right now. And our membership grew just tremendously during that time. Looking at it from a financial standpoint, from a sales side, companies really weren't hiring very much. So We looked at that and said, great opportunity. Every single person you hire is going to matter even more. Therefore, you want to make sure you invest and hire the right person. Where do you find the right people? It's LinkedIn. So come to us for that. And so we messaged exactly what was happening in the industry, and what people were worried about. And we showed them this is where our value shines even more. And again, we grew just exponentially during that time, because we did tell people, here's what's going on and here's how. And we even shaped our platform mainly through messaging, to let people know this is where you can gain even more value.
Okay.
So, look for the opportunities.
Thank you. And Sapati, what's your advice to a startup leader who's feeling anxious and dealing with a crisis right now?
Yeah, I think as Susan alluded, it really does not matter whether it's in a crisis or whenever. Starting a business is just in its nature difficult, so I think one of the things that you as a startup you need to appreciate and be prepared for is that it will be difficult, but what problem are you solving? That's the question that you need to ask yourself. And from that question, you should be able to find your solutions. What problem are you solving? And is it relevant to what the world is currently struggling with or in need of?
Lovely. There's so much. Thank you for all the questions that are coming in. There's just so much more we could talk about. Maybe Tom will have us back another time to go deeper into some of these issues. So firstly, can I thank the audience very much for staying with us, for asking so many great questions. If you want to get in touch with me on LinkedIn, I'll try and answer any questions that you have. And also thank you to our 4 panelists who have stuck to the brief. Thank you very much. You've prepared, you've been very articulate, and there's so much useful stuff in there for us all, no matter what kind of form our organizational model is. So thank you very much.